So that is a brief overview of artifact stuff. I just wanted to give you some real standout examples. Those cone top cans, the church key cans, the purple glass, those kind of things that are real definite markers that, hey, this is over 50 years old. And then a brief history of Oak Creek Canyon. There is, this ranger district has an incredible density of prehistoric sites. The occupation here was as high as pretty much anywhere in the American Southwest. It's got one of the highest densities in the country. Oddly, Oak Creek Canyon does not have a high site density of prehistoric sites. We have a few, but far less than is in the surrounding areas. People ask me that all the time. My only thought is that it's probably just environmentally not a niche that was very good for subsistence. It was a little bit too cold to farm. The orchards did well, but even in historic times, farming never really worked out up there. I think it was just a touch too cold. That's the only reason that I can come up with, because it certainly has good water. It is very important in ceremonial sense. There's a lot of there's a number, both Yavapai and Apache have origin stories that Oak Creek Canyon plays a role in. There is still a traditional gathering place for a number of tribes, including the Hopi, considered a sacred place. They come back and gather reeds and other riparian vegetation from there. So it's important, but we don't have a lot from an archaeological sense, you know, an artifacts of broken pottery and broken stone kind of sense. It was important historically to the Apaches. We know that J.J. Thompson, the first homesteaded at Indian Gardens. And it's called Indian Gardens because it was an Apache garden. You know, he was told to me, maybe Chris expanded on this, but there's apparently a bunch of Apache women and their Navajo husbands who were living in Oak Creek Canyon at the time. And actually during the Apache Wars, they hid out in Oak Creek Canyon quite a bit. And supposedly during one of the raids, the soldiers captured an Apache girl, and on the way back to the fort, they stopped, they were going through Cornville, and one of the ranchers adopted the little girl. And we think that she's buried at the edge of one of our big prehistoric sites with a gravestone. But we think that that's the girl who was captured during that raid. So we do have some information from the 1800s about how the Apache were using it. Next slide. Spanish, everyone likes to talk about the Spanish. There's no reason to connect the Spanish to Oak Creek Canyon. The Spanish did come through the Verde Valley. They certainly went to Jerome. But there is nothing to indicate they came through Sedona. In fact, if I had to guess, they were probably following some version of the Tlaquepaque Trail, which drops off the rim just down the road here, just behind the office. Either there, or they dropped off into Red Tank Draw using one of the old prehistoric trails. Probably didn't go through Sedona or Oak Creek Canyon. So the first Americans to visit the Sedona area, two parties from Fort Whipple came over in 1864. Prescott was established as the territorial capital in 1863. They sent a party from New Mexico over to set up the new capital. And soon thereafter, they sent two different small military campaigns over to scout. And shortly thereafter, people started homesteading over here. The first documented squatter at that time, he didn't prove up until later, but J.J. Thompson settled at Indian Gardens. I've seen it 1875, but most of the resources I have say that was 1876 when he actually first hit Indian Gardens. Next slide. Homesteading expanded quickly in the 1880s, and it was mainly orchards to provide fresh fruit to the miners in Jerome, also to the military as well, and some other things. But really, Jerome was the economic engine for the orchards. They also would go up to Flagstaff to sell, And at that time, there's a trail called Thompson's Ladder, and it's right behind J.J. Thompson's homestead at Indian Gardens. It's a nasty trail that zigzags up the cliff face. And if anyone in the canyon wanted to go to Flag to trade, what they would do is load all of their fruit or whatever else they happen to have on their horses, go up the trail, and they all left their wagons at the top. They'd load it all into the wagons, hook up to the wagons, drive across the top to Flag, buy, sell, do whatever they do, load their wagons up, come back, park at the top of the rim, load everything out of the wagons onto their horses, and start doing trips up and down Thompson's Ladder to get it into the canyon. So Flag was definitely a trade center, but probably Jerome was the most important part of the economy. The Thompsons, Purdymans, and the James family, in some geometry, account or are somehow tied to almost every homestead up there. Other folks did come in. There's a lot of turnover. A lot of the homesteads, for instance, Purdymans, they homesteaded all kinds of stuff, but before they would be able to prove up for various reasons, like the land crash of 1907, things got really tight. They had to give up their homesteads, sold them off to other people. So O&B or other names show up as the actual homesteader, but the initial claims were often made by Purdymans and other people associated with these families. And then after the highway was open, particularly after Midgley Bridge opened in '38, then tourism really became the big thing in the canyon. And that's when we get things like Call of the Canyon, and Mayhew switches from an orchard more to a tourist, a hotel kind of thing. Next slide, if there is one. I think this is where I started having trouble